Yeah. Well, man, it's great to meet you. I'm looking forward to getting into your work as
Yeah.
a mindset like an event guru, and I want to begin our process here with COVID. 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out how we were going to get out of it. How did you ultimately get through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
So for me, ironically, like the first, because it was going to be the spring of 2020 was going to be such a packed time of year for me, probably the most packed I probably ever had been, that I don't want to say I welcomed COVID, but the break was actually not that bad because it was like, okay, I actually get to kind of sit and pause and kind of be and collect with my thoughts. I probably had a little bit of a different point of view than most people just because the nature of what I'm doing is, I had been running a marathon for a decade by that point. So it was actually nice to kind of, I always like to say that, think about it, that the world tore their ACL. So I tore my ACL and basically had to just be on the sidelines. So coming out of COVID, what I realized with events is one, everybody lost a step. I mean, and I've had access to, some of the world's best entertainers and all that. Every single person lost a step. There wasn't a person who didn't. So I came into coming back to events with the mindset that we're all kind of at the same point. No one's going to be no one's going to be where they were. And, someone asked me once, what was it like going back to events again? And I used the ACL analogy, and but things just moved so fast that it was almost like everyone expected you to run 22 miles of the 26 miles on your very first run after you tore your ACL and went through rehab. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting time. I hope it's a time we never have to experience again, but it was a really interesting couple of years there for sure.
That's a great analogy. So let me get to the heart and soul of exactly what you do for a living. I mean, on paper, it's evident, but I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at career day. One of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
So I go to events and write about top nonprofits and the good work that people do to make their homes better and to make the towns that they live in better and to make the cities that they live in better. And what I get to do is I get to sit and be in the audience. So I get to watch everything that happens. And if you ever go to an event, you'll see people that are on the stage. They're looking at it from a certain point of view. I, being in the audience, have to look at everybody's point of view. So I understand what it takes to make a really good event because I understand what every single person brings to it.
So that has to give you a certain amount of hope on this planet that things are being done in a good way and you get to see good entertainment. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. What I love about what I do the most is when you do something for a nonprofit, it really brings all these various cross sections of a community together.
Yeah.
And it's really one of the few places where you can do that because, most people can experience, have had a sick kid, or most people have experienced cancer, or most people have, are inspired by certain forms of art. And it really brings, if you think of a community like an octopus with all these tentacles, it brings, the octopus is literally grabbing something from 8 different parts of your community and they're putting them in a room together. And that is a really uplifting thing. And I'm just really grateful that I get to do every day.
Yeah, what a great gig. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Oh gosh, when I was in the third grade, I probably wanted to be a lawyer if
Okay.
I were to guess.
Did you pursue it?
No, by the time I was in middle and high school, and I was one of those people, I'm an introvert. And I think at the time, my whole thought of just getting in front of a courtroom and in front of a judge, I think was a little too intimidating for me. And I went to college and I graduated with communications and wound up in technology sales. So, I wound up being in front of people. But what I realized in the tech industry, as I was in it more and more, but a big part of it is doing stuff after hours and going to events. And a lot of them weren't good in my 20s. I did many, many, many things that I regret. Probably should have been fired on more than one occasion. Um, and it led me to, this world that I just never thought that I would be in, almost by accident.
So let's get to the beginnings of your life. Tell me where you were born and raised and how these seeds got into you to lead to your career path now. How did all this kind of evolve into you?
So I grew up outside of Philadelphia and I was the smart kid. And smart kids aren't supposed to be social kids. And everything that any adult, whether it was personally or at school or anything, steered me in this way that I didn't really want to go because while I was an introvert, I am fascinated by people. I just think people are just interesting, dynamic creatures, and everyone has a different story and everyone has a different background. And I almost think that I went into a sales career as almost a resistance and an I'll show you, even though I wasn't necessarily the best salesperson. I just wanted to do it because I wanted to be out there with people. And um, that led me to when I met my husband 15 years ago. He had a magazine and he didn't have someone to write about Austin events at the time. So I came in and he asked me if I wanted to do it. And being able to do that and be in the room and be accepted in the room as an introvert, I don't keep getting invited back if I'm not a good guest. And really, what I have learned about myself is don't let anyone tell you that you can't be something with your skill set. There are so many ways that you can be successful. Just lean into what you know and you're confident in about yourself, and you'll find the comfort in it.
So what was one of the early shows you went to that was one of the biggest growth moments for you? Where maybe it was a little out of the comfort zone or it was magnanimous and it really made you get into the role.
So that's an easy one. It was the very first gala I ever went to. So Austin has an Austin version of Dancing with the Stars, the TV show. So it's a 1,000-person event. At the time, I did not own a tux, and it was black tie. I had one suit, so I had to, improvise. I went to the nearest men's warehouse and got my tux so that I could get it ready in, 4 days and get out the door and do that. What I realized going in was, thankfully, my husband is an extrovert. And what I have found, and it's one of the things I really work on with what I do, is introverts and extroverts are really a good yin and yang. Um, and the thing that I learned is if I have an extrovert, they carry their load, but I can just be me. I don't have to be as outgoing as the extrovert. I can be myself as the introvert and add tremendous value. And that's kind of what I learned when I went to that first event was I could just say a few things and people really like to talk about themselves. So if you just ask questions as an introvert, and you get taught, and you talk with somebody who's really interesting and offers things up, there is no limit to the amount of things that you can uncover and learn, things that are interesting and things you probably shouldn't know, but they tell you because they're comfortable with you anyway.
That's so true, man, because that's the way it is. People do love talking about themselves. And if you open that door, that's an easy gig because they're going to go. That's for
They
sure.
are, I like to call it the wind-up toy effect. And there have been dinners that I've been to where in 90 minutes, I'll literally ask 3 questions because people
Wow.
just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
That's wild.
sometimes that's painful if it's just someone who's a blowhard, but
Yeah.
if it's someone who's interesting, God, it's just you're getting all this valuable information. I understand kind of what I do is a very rarefied world. So I get to hear and listen and experience things if you're next to a really interesting person. But I know most of the world doesn't get to experience. And it really has just been the most wonderfully unconventional education experience I think a human being could ever have.
I sometimes see these commercials for like people that travel all the time or they're doing these interesting adventures and they got this TV show and I'm like, how did they land this gig? And I think about that with you. It's like you just everything came into alignment. The stars aligned and you just there you go. But you had the choice to stand out, to make it what it is.
Absolutely. And, I also had to make a choice of because, at the time I had the first 5 years, I basically was still in the tech industry. And all week I'd be traveling. Most weeks I'd be gone 3 days. I'd have to come home and I'd have to throw on a tux. And in addition, the publication that I have is a regional one. So some weekends I would come home and throw on a tux and go to something in Austin. But many weekends I'd have to go to Dallas, or I'd have to go to Houston, or I'd have to go to San Antonio. I'd have to go to other markets. And the more I did the events, the more I realized how awful business events were. To the point in the last year that I worked in the tech industry, I would deliberately stay in other cities. So like if I had something in New York, I'd stay in Philly. If I had something in Greenville, South Carolina, I'd stay in Atlanta. So like I would deliberately like avoid, try to avoid those situations. And that's when I kind of realized I want to make this shift out of what I had been doing for 15 years that was very comfortable into something that, I don't want to say was new, but it was something that was unknown. And it's certainly not something that most people do for a living. So it's,
Yeah.
it's one of those things when I say it, if people are interested, they'll say, tell me more. And you kind of have to walk them through what you do because it's not something where I can pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you experiencing with this? It's a very small group of people that do this line of work.
And the other thing that's interesting about this too is like I'm kind of joking around a little bit. Austin is the center of the world. You're getting primo things. I mean, this is probably like when you look at like arts and entertainment, there's not a better city on the planet right now that people want to go to than Austin, I would think.
Absolutely. And the thing with philanthropy, and this is if there is one piece of advice I would give to any person moving to a new city is get involved in your community. Join a board, volunteer, whatever it is. And the thing is that a lot of these top nonprofit events I go to now, I've gotten to listen to just amazing singers over the years. And, you can pay, and Austin has a venue called Austin City Limits. And a lot of the top of galas, like Matthew McConaughey's gala, not McGala, gala, the main patrons are on the floor, but they will also sell seats up high so that you can experience this concert. So you can give a tax deductible donation and you can listen to people like Garth Brooks perform. Like
Yeah.
it's just really, it's really awesome to see that. And that's something that conveys not just in Austin, but there's a lot of other cities where that type of stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's one of the really nice, I don't want to call it an ancillary benefit, but that's one of those nice things about being involved in your community is if you are and you're in the know, you're going to get access to these things that are kind of pinch me moments, like from when you were a kid.
It's interesting. I came back from Oklahoma City a few weeks ago and they rebuilt their downtown and it was just kind of this Midwestern might kind of a thing. And there's so many voices that are behind all of this. Like you said, when you get to a new town, when you have a place like Austin with such vitality and life, there's so many people that never make in the newspapers that are doing all of this work to really lift it up, to make it vibrant, relevant, growing. It's interesting how all that works.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say that there's basically for anything that's successful, whether it's a nonprofit event, whether it's a business, whether it's a board, whatever it is, there's really three legs to the stool. So first, obviously, is money and the financial capital. But there's also the human capital, like you said, and you hit the nail on the head, the people that are doing the work. And then there's the social capital, and that's just how connected you are with others. And I have found very, very, very few people bring all three. Most people bring one or two, but
Yeah.
you need that balance and you need that yin and yang of energy to, to really grow an organization of any type in an organic way that draws more people in that they want to be a part of it.
So who's been a hero? Who's been an inspiration for you in your life?
In my life, I would say, I would say there's this photographer named Bill Cunningham, and I'm going to this line of work. And he, for years, worked for the New York Times and shot fashion. Like, I think it was like 59th and I'm going to get the wrong North South Street, but it was like 59th and like Madison or something like that. And he went to a lot of events. And, it was funny. I saw a documentary of him about 4 or 5 years ago, and he lived in Carnegie Hall. So like there were a lot of, artists that lived in Carnegie Hall, and he was one of them, before he passed away. And, you know, I saw him in action. They would like bring cameras with him, and I just loved how modest and how grateful and how genuine he was to be there. And I think about that every time I walk into a room, how grateful I am to be in something like this, because I know and I understand like he did, not everyone gets access to this, to that, and just get to meet a wide range of really interesting people.
What would be a dream event you would love to go to and see? Just kind of tucked in the back of your mind. What would be that event?
So I've had the good fortune of doing international galas before. And they're really fascinating just because Americans are uniquely philanthropic. Most other countries in the world, it's much more run by the government, or there's public funds behind it. So there's like a gala in Venice that I would love to go to, called Save Venice, just because the city is sinking, and just experiencing people, because those types of galas bring in people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that is, if you want if you want to see the world bigger than yourself, go to something in another city where you don't live in, because each city has its own personality. And that's kind of what fascinates me about going to, events in Dallas and Houston all the time, is what I could do in Austin, I could never get away with in Houston, but I could never get away with in Dallas. So part of it is, for me, is I learn a lot about myself and kind of certain aspects of your personality. And what I've learned along the way is, there's a lot of pressure right now for people to be themselves all the time and be authentic, quote unquote, all the time. And what I have learned is, you can showcase certain aspects of your personality at events. And I always like to equate it to, would you do shoulder presses 365 days a year? No, because you tear your muscles. So it's okay to give those other muscles a break. Just know what you're walking into, to be like, you know what? I'm going to develop this aspect of me today. And if I lean in a little bit more to it, it's okay. I don't have to bring every single thing about me. And that's a source of a lot of people's anxiety with attending events. It comes from that place.
So, of everything that you've done and seen and accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
It's the next issue that we're doing of our publication. So we're doing an annual galas issue, and I've got 57 of different events from throughout the state of Texas, and one international event with, where a Texan chaired it. And the amount raised between all of them is over $100 million. So to be able to bring together people from so many different cities to showcase the work and the power of that work is really something. Professionally, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, because that's a lot to corral,
Yeah.
but it's been so gratifying to do something that I don't know if anyone else has ever done it before. And that's always kind of the things I'm really proud of are things that I put my own spin on, that, because there is no such thing as an original concept, and making it something that really hasn't been done or tried or tested before.
Wow. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone around you. But what you're running the show, what's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
So I am someone who is a learner and a listener first and foremost. And I would say people, because they see me on Instagram or whatever, they think I'm the ultimate extrovert, and I'm not. It's just, I know how to engage other people and let them do the heavy lifting. And that's really the key to any introvert being successful at an event, is let the other people do the heavy lifting, because it's all about oxygen. And if you have a room full of 100 introverts, it's going to feel lifeless. There's not going to be any oxygen in the room. If you have 100 extroverts in a room, there's too much oxygen, and everyone kind of knows what happens when there's too much oxygen in a room. That's where basically the real house fill in the blank of whatever city or whatever space kind of comes into play. So your value as an introvert is so important, for any of your introverted listeners. It is so important to have both. And if you're an introvert who's married to an extrovert, talk to one another and understand how you can help each other, so that you're not leaving. And I know a lot of introvert and extrovert couples struggle with that, leaving. Look at the things and value that they bring. And if you're an extrovert, know your introvert, your introverted partner is going to have a limit. And if you're an introvert, know the extrovert needs that oxygen to command the room, and that it's not about you. They just physically actually need that.
It's fascinating. So if anyone wants to pick up the new issue, if they want to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, where's the best place for people to go?
So the best place to go is go to eventmindset.com, and you can, and you can work with me. So I really do work with individuals to help them optimize these types of events. And I have two different curriculums. I have one for guests, which I have everyone go through, and then one for hosts. Because anyone who has hosted an event who's been successful that I've gotten to see, every single one of them, the one thing they have in common is they're all good guests.
Wonderful. This is fascinating, Rob. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Keep doing the wonderful work out there, man.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Take care.